Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a complex stack of source material, really cut through the noise, and try to give you the essential strategic knowledge you need. Today, we are doing a deep analysis of something we're calling the Great Convergence. It's this really powerful and I think quite consequential alignment between BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, and the World Economic Forum, the WEF, the global policy guys.
Yeah, it's fascinating because for years, the whole promise, the original idea behind decentralized tech was, well, disintermediation, radical disintermediation.
Right. Get rid of the gatekeepers.
Exactly. Build this parallel financial system free from the old guard. But what we're seeing now, and it's laid bare in these sources we've looked at, is the gatekeepers aren't just coming back.
Uh-uh.
They're completely rebuilding the infrastructure,
No.
making sure they own the new digital highway.
And what's really critical for you to grasp here is the power dynamic that's unfolding. We're looking at a strategic partnership, really, that is fundamentally reshaping the digital asset market.
Well, it's steering it towards institutional control, towards compliant infrastructure.
Yeah.
This isn't just, passive adoption like, oh, crypto's interesting. No, this is an active, pretty aggressive effort to channel the future of finance towards centralization,
Even though they're using DLT, distributed ledger tech?
even while using the tech that promised the opposite. It's a paradox.
Okay, so let's really unpack this. It feels like a monumental shift. We've analyzed a bunch of material, BlackRock's commercial strategy docs, WEF global governance blueprints, market reactions.
Yeah, the consequences are already visible.
Right. So we're going to cover this through, let's say, three distinct lenses. They seem necessary to get the full picture. First, the vision. What's the institutional mandate? Tokenization. Second, the nexus. How do policy and power sync up? That BlackRock WEF connection.
A shared structure.
And finally, the consequence. How does this split the market? Who wins, who loses in this new compliant digital world? Okay, segment one, the vision. We really have to start with the cognitive dissonance. Looking at BlackRock's big reversal here.
It's pretty stark.
Yeah, if you rewind, 6, 7 years? Larry Fink, BlackRock's CEO, he was one of the loudest critics out there.
Oh, absolutely. Publicly.
The source material quotes him back in 2017, 2018, calling crypto basically an index of money laundering.
Yeah, that was his line. And that skepticism, it wasn't just a throwaway comment. It felt, foundational to how he saw the world then. Deep concern about the lack of compliance, the anonymity.
The Wild West nature of early crypto.
Exactly. But now, you look at BlackRock's corporate filings, Fink's recent public statements, especially those annual letters he writes.
A complete 180.
Totally. He now states quite unequivocally that tokenization is the future of finance. Not just a part of it, the future. Requiring the existing system to be, rebuilt from the ground up, his words.
So that shift from arch skeptic to, almost an evangelist. It must be driven by something massive. The scale of the ambition here, what are they actually chasing?
Well, it's sheer scale. It's a multi-trillion-dollar strategy we're talking about. Fink now sees tokenization as, and I quote, one of the most exciting areas of growth.
Okay.
And this connects directly to the projected market size for tokenizing real-world assets, RWAs. You see conservative projections, maybe $3.5 trillion by 2030.
Which is already huge.
It is. But BlackRock's internal estimates, the ones reflecting what they think they can actually handle operationally, push that number way higher. Think $10 trillion.
Wow.
Maybe even over $13 trillion. And they're mobilizing their entire machine that's $10.5 trillion in assets under management towards this goal.
So this isn't just a side project.
No way. This requires systemic change,
Yeah.
regulatory change. It's not just a pilot program.
Which brings us to the why. Why the big reversal? Why would the world's biggest asset manager want to potentially dismantle parts of the system they already dominate? The sources say it's mainly about cost reduction, efficiency.
That's the core driver. It's about making the massive, frankly clunky, existing financial machinery vastly cheaper to operate. Think about it.
Okay.
When BlackRock handles the volume, they do proxy voting, stock settlement, real estate funds, Even tiny efficiency gains per transaction add up to billions saved.
Right, across trillions of dollars.
Exactly. Consider assets like corporate bonds or private equity or even just buying a house.
Hmm.
Right now, they're clogged with intermediaries, manual legal checks, settlement times of days, T+2, T+3.
Lots of friction, waiting around, risk.
That friction is the target. It's the single biggest target. Fink argues tokenization can just slash multiple fees, cut out intermediaries, significantly reduce that embedded friction.
Make things faster, cheaper.
And the WEF's research backs this up. They estimate that using DLT, specifically for this kind of infrastructure plumbing, could generate global operational cost savings of maybe $15 to $20 billion a year.
Annually.
For a giant like BlackRock, these aren't just nice to haves. They become mandatory operational goals. It secures their edge, cuts capital risk, speeds up settlement to almost real time. That efficiency drive, that's what powers the whole compliance mandate.
Okay, so that's the strategy, the vision. Let's move to the how, the operational steps. BlackRock isn't just talking, they're actively building these compliant funds on specific rails. How does their infrastructure footprint actually show this strategy in action?
Well, they executed this really smart, phased, dual approach. It's quite clever.
Okay, what's phase one?
Phase one was about providing regulated, very familiar access to existing crypto assets. Think of the iShares Bitcoin Trust ETF, I bet. Launched January 2024.
Right, the big ETF launch.
Exactly. The ETF structure, that's something traditional investors understand. It's regulated. It uses institutional custodians like Coinbase Prime. It basically de-risks Bitcoin exposure for their big clients, high net worth institutions. It's a compliant gateway, turning Bitcoin into just another asset class, effectively.
Got it. And phase two, that's the real tokenization push, right? The RWA focus.
This is the heart of that $10 trillion vision. And we see it in things like the BlackRock USD Institutional Digital Liquidity Fund, BUIDL.
BUIDL. Okay.
This fund focuses on tokenizing really liquid, low volatility compliant assets. Basically tokenized U.S. Treasury reserves. And it uses stablecoin rails.
And how's that been received?
It grew incredibly fast, hit $2.8 billion very quickly, which just shows this intense institutional hunger for yield-bearing, compliant digital products.
And you mentioned specific rails. What's crucial is where they launched BUIDL. The sources flag deployment on, quote, institutional-grade infrastructure, specifically the SEI network via KIIO. Why is that choice, SEI network, so telling?
Because it reveals their checklist, their selection criteria. They're picking architecture, not ideology, meaning they aren't opting for general purpose chains like, say, older Ethereum networks or even some general layer 2s. SEI is different. It's a high performance layer 1 blockchain built explicitly for financial throughput.
Okay.
It's optimized for security, yes, but also the sheer speed you need for automated, compliant, composable financial transactions at scale.
So if a typical chain handles maybe hundreds, thousands of transactions a second with some lag, a chain like SEI is built for
instantaneous high-frequency settlement. The kind you need for a global system.
Right.
Look, when you're managing $2.8 billion today, but you're planning for $10 trillion tomorrow, you just cannot tolerate variable finality times or unpredictable high gas fees. These tokenized funds, they need to plug into the compliant stablecoin world, provide yield, sure, but they have to operate within a pre-approved, robust, compliant box. The goal is automation, security, at massive scale, and only these highly optimized financial all-ones really meet that need.
This really brings us to that central paradox you mentioned. It's at the heart of this whole deep dive. DLT, the tech, promised decentralization, disintermediation. BlackRock is using it for efficiency and scale. How does this aggressive push for efficiency via DLT inherently lead back to centralization?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, isn't it?
Right.
The sources suggest the tech is being deployed primarily as a tool for what we could call cost centralization.
Cost centralization.
Think about it. If BlackRock, the world's biggest incumbent, is the one who successfully uses this tech to eliminate all those smaller intermediaries,
Yeah.
they aren't actually dispersing power. They're concentrating the efficiency gains, and the control that comes with it into their own hands.
They become the single super efficient intermediary.
Pretty much, the DLT ends up solidifying the incumbent's position, not undermining it.
Right.
They're the ones funding and building the new infrastructure. So the resulting system, even if it's technologically distributed underneath, is centrally controlled by the standards, the access points, the infrastructure owned by the incumbents who paid for it.
And this move towards compliant controlled platforms just concentrates power.
Fundamentally, it concentrates power over standards, over access, rather than promoting genuine, permissionless decentralization. And this massive commercial urgency, that multi-trillion-dollar drive for speed and efficiency, it creates huge, almost existential pressure on policy bodies like the WEF. It forces that alignment between capital and policy to speed up.
Okay, so we've got the commercial engine. BlackRock's a $10 trillion tokenization vision. Now, segment 2, the nexus. We need to look closely at the policy architects, the WEF, and how their paths haven't just converged. They seem to have actually merged into a kind of single decision-making structure.
Yeah, this is where that structural link becomes really hard to ignore. We have to zoom right in on the specific governance overlap. Lawrence D. Fink, CEO of BlackRock.
Yes.
He currently serves as the interim co-chair of the World Economic Forum Board of Trustees.
Okay, let's pause on that because it's significant. The person controlling the world's largest pool of private capital is also sitting in a direct governance role, co-chairing the board of the organization that sets global policy agendas. What does that actually mean practically for how policy gets made?
Well, it pretty much ensures that the WEF's strategic direction, especially for its really important Center for Financial and Monetary Systems, is inherently aligned with BlackRock's operational needs, their commercial mandates.
So BlackRock gets a seat at the table before the policy is even fully baked.
Unparalleled strategic access at the policy formation stage. Fink isn't just like offering advice from the sidelines. He's right there helping define the strategic priorities. And we see him using forums like Davos to actively push regulators towards specific kinds of modernization.
What kind of specific bottlenecks is he highlighting in those forums?
The sources mention his focus on the huge overheads tied to existing processes. For a firm like BlackRock, things like compliance checks, proxy voting for thousands of companies across global markets, that costs an astronomical amount of money.
Right, the operational drag.
Exactly. So Fink champions tokenization not just as modern tech, but specifically as a way to automate and drastically slash those compliance overheads. The commercial pain points for BlackRock effectively become the global policy problems the WEF is then tasked with solving.
That direct linkage.
Yeah.
It makes the critique you sometimes hear about corporate capture seem incredibly relevant here. If the biggest corporation helps define the needed regulatory fixes,
then those fixes inevitably serve their interests.
right?
This role helps create what the sources call a regulatory moat around this emerging institutional digital economy.
A moat. How does that work?
It basically raises the entry barrier for anyone trying to do true bottom-up decentralization. BlackRock and its allies, by being involved in defining these complex demand and compliance standards, think universal AML KYC, robust digital ID systems.
Yeah.
They ensure the future system is designed in a way that favors well-capitalized, established players who can afford to implement all that.
So how does that compliance moat actually work against, say, a smaller, more decentralized project? What's the functional barrier?
It's about resources and legal burden. Imagine if the future standard requires integrating really complex protocols, something like the compliant architecture for security tokens or CAS-K framework into every single smart contract.
Okay, CST.
That CAS framework, for instance, it basically hardwires KYC and AML checks right into the smart contract's logic, meaning no transaction can even happen unless pre-approved identity protocols are met.
Compliance baked in at the code level.
Exactly. A small decentralized team. They simply cannot absorb the cost, the legal risk, the complexity of implementing that globally. So by making this level of complexity the global standard, the incumbents basically guarantee their own dominance because only they have the scale and resources to build and deploy these high compliance systems everywhere.
Okay, let's look at the WEF's policy output itself then. If they're the architect, what's the main pillar of their governance blueprint for this compliant digital finance world?
Well, it centers on DLT initiatives, but specifically those designed to ensure security, transparency, trust, all the things institutional capital demands. A major piece is their Digital Currency Governance Consortium, the DCGC.
BCGC.
Yeah, it's highly influential in guiding global policymakers on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, stable coins, all the related regulations.
And CBDCs are pretty much non-negotiable for this BlackRock vision to work at scale, right?
They seem to be the essential settlement layer. The WEF really champions wholesale CBDCs or WCBDC,
Wholesale ones.
right, for modernizing financial market infrastructure, especially for the big stuff. High-value interbank payments, securities transactions. You can think of WCBDCs as the compliant, centralized digital form of central bank money, the digital fiat liability you absolutely need to underpin the real-time, high-volume settlement of BlackRock's $10 trillion tokenized world.
You can't have instant settlement of a tokenized office building or bond without it.
Not reliably at scale.
Yeah.
You need that unified central bank-backed digital currency to provide the transaction finality instantly.
And the sources confirm this isn't just theory, it's a global trend. Over 98% of central banks are looking into or already piloting CBDCs.
It's happening.
But this is where you hit maximum friction with the public, isn't it? The traceability mandate.
This is the ideological flashpoint, absolutely. The main policy driver for CBDCs, according to the sources we looked at, is the ability they offer to create a complete digital trail of all data linked to a transaction.
Every transaction.
Collected, processed, stored, primarily for mandatory compliance, anti-money laundering, AML, countering financing of terrorism, CTF.
So the benefit for state control for surveillance, it directly clashes with that original crypto ideal of, cash-like privacy.
Absolutely. And the WEF knows this. They acknowledge the friction. They note that the potential loss of privacy is the single biggest public objection to rolling out CBDCs. But by framing control and compliance, the ability to trace everything as non-negotiable prerequisites for the system to be adopted widely, the WEF is essentially performing this global political preconditioning.
Setting the stage.
Exactly. It legitimizes institutionally led projects that embed traceability by design, while at the same time, it increases the systemic regulatory pressure on any protocol trying to be truly permissionless or anonymous.
So traceability is basically a done deal in this future financial system, which leads us straight to the next crucial layer needed, digital identity.
Correct. Fink himself has said it publicly. The full $10 trillion potential of DLT, it's unreachable without a new, secure digital identity verification system. It's the mandatory bridge, connecting the physical world of legal people and companies to the digital world of tokenized assets.
And surprise, surprise, the WEF's blueprint seems perfectly designed to deliver exactly what BlackRock says it needs.
The alignment is profound. The WEF sees digital ID as a critical enabler for DLT. They state flat out that accurate identity information is non-negotiable for compliance.
And what does their roadmap look like?
It details plans to integrate physical identity protocols, passports, national IDs with DLT, and potentially leverage new, much broader data sets, things like social media activity, mobile phone usage, data from connected devices, to build these incredibly detailed digital footprints, all in the name of enhancing compliance oversight, pervasive oversight.
So that congruence, it really does suggest a single shared architectural blueprint for the future of finance. You called it the Finternet, where policy and capital are just completely synced up.
It looked that way. The WEF designs the global operating system specifications, if you like, and BlackRock becomes the largest, most demanding application running on it.
Driving adoption through sheer scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
WEF provides the regulatory architecture, BlackRock brings the capital, the operational need, and the sheer scale to accelerate the global rollout of that specific system. It feels like a very deep, very coordinated effort to ensure the next generation of finance is efficient, yes, but also compliant, traceable, and ultimately centralized under the supervision of the incumbents.
Okay, so if the vision is $10 trillion in tokenized assets and the nexus is that BlackRock WEF policy synchronization, what's the final piece? The consequence. We move from abstract policy discussions to actual market impact, tangible asset values.
Right. And the central outcome we're seeing, according to the sources, is a structural split, a bifurcation of the entire digital asset market
Yeah.
into two distinct and fundamentally unequal tiers,
Driven by.
driven by that institutional mandate for control and compliance we've been talking about.
Okay, let's define those two tiers clearly for everyone listening.
So tier one, this is the realm of compliant liquid assets. Think assets packaged in regulated wrappers like the Bitcoin or XRP ETPs, or, crucially, protocols that function as compliant auditable infrastructure pieces themselves.
And these attract.
These attract the really big pools of traditional institutional capital. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, BlackRock's own massive client base. That's tier one.
Got it. And tier two.
Tier two is the permissionless, arguably non-compliant zone. These are assets that prioritize things like high anonymity, open access, full decentralization above all else.
And the consequence for them.
They face systemic regulatory risk. Their utility diminishes because they're fundamentally incompatible with those mandatory digital ID requirements and the coming CBDC settlement rails. They can't easily plug into the regulated system.
So this means institutions don't just prefer permission DLT.
Yeah.
They're effectively making it the only viable route for regulated money to flow through.
It's basically a commercial mandate at this point.
Yeah.
Institutional capital, by its nature, demands high security, predictable scalability, and strict adherence to global AML/CTF rules.
Non-negotiables.
Absolutely. And this necessitates using private permission or maybe hybrid DLT structures where access can be controlled and audited. And like we discussed with CAMOS-T, they're coding compliance directly into the base layer. Access control, KYC/ML checks, become hardwired prerequisites in the transaction logic itself. That mandates control at the protocol level. It pushes out anything that can't or won't comply.
Okay, let's name names then. Which protocols have already shown themselves to be the structural winners in this new compliant architecture? The tier one assets enabling this system.
Well, number one on that list, based on the sources, has to be Chainlink, the LENK. Its role seems absolutely indispensable.
Why indispensable?
Because that institutional RWA market, the $10 trillion one, it relies entirely on smart contracts. But smart contracts are dumb about the real world. They need reliable, compliant, external data feeds.
Oracles.
Exactly. Oracles feeding things like identity verification status, the value of off-chain collateral, compliance history checks, fed directly and securely onto the blockchain.
So Chainlink isn't just a data feed. It's positioned as a critical compliance conduit for this whole tokenized economy.
Precisely. It bridges the compliant off-chain world identity data to the on-chain smart contracts. Without Chainlink, or something very much like it, providing that verifiable, institutionally trusted bridge, that $10 trillion tokenized market stays purely hypothetical. It's like the essential plumbing needed for compliant smart contracts to actually work, a core infrastructure piece.
Okay, Chainlink. Who's next? Let's look at an asset where regulatory clarity was obviously the key to unlock Tier 1 status, XRP.
Yeah, XRP's recent story perfectly confirms the main thesis here. Regulatory certainty is the ultimate green light for institutional money.
The SEC settlement being the key event.
The definitive 2024 SEC settlement provided that necessary legal clarity. And what happened immediately after?
The floodgates opened.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Instant launch of spot XRP exchange-traded products. By BlackRock, their iShares XRPI, but also Fidelity, VanEck.
Yeah.
The big players jumped right in.
That reaction speed itself seems like crucial evidence. It shows the pent-up demand was just waiting for the legal...
Yeah. It's the clearest signal you could ask for. Regulatory sanction is the only thing that truly matters for unlocking that institutional flow. Total assets under management across just those three spot XRP ETPs, there are over $1.9 billion within the first month.
Wow.
And crucially, over 60% of that inflow came directly from sophisticated institutional investors. It proves the model: get the asset legally sanctioned, package it in a familiar ETP wrapper, and BlackRock and others will deploy their vast client networks to pour liquidity into it.
Okay. And finally, let's circle back to those institutional layer ones, like say a network, which you mentioned was chosen for the BUIDL launch.
Right. That choice just reinforces the institutional priority list. They prioritize architectures designed explicitly for financial functions. That means fast, cheap, high throughput, and crucially easy to integrate compliance features.
Function over philosophy.
You could say that. Say was likely chosen because it prioritizes the raw speed and security needed for instant financial transactions, perhaps over the broader, more philosophical commitments of some older general-purpose chains that aren't as optimized for finance. The institutions are vetting the tech stack itself, and they clearly favor platforms tailored to their specific compliance, speed-intensive needs.
Right. Now, let's flip to the other side. Tier 2. The projects facing these structural headwinds. You mentioned the core conflict is anonymity versus the traceability imperative.
Yeah, that convergence of CBDC traceability pushed by the WEF mandate and Fink's public requirement for digital ID, it creates an almost existential threat for tokens that are built around pure privacy or anonymity.
Why existential?
Because that early crypto ideal, the digital cash-like privacy, it's just fundamentally incompatible with the new global regulatory architecture being built. An architecture designed from the ground up for AML-CTF reporting and traceability. The system has no pathway to integrate verifiable digital identity. It faces increasing isolation.
Yeah.
Potential delisting from regulated exchanges, difficulties with on-off ramps, mounting legal jeopardy in major jurisdictions. It gets pushed to the fringes.
And this structural problem is then amplified by how capital actually moves, right? If BlackRock is directing trillions only towards regulated, compliant products, that must concentrate liquidity.
It seems inevitable. As BlackRock and other institutions channel these vast sums toward regulated products and compliant RWA tokens on specific chains, the market likely sees a proportional flight of liquidity away from purely decentralized, permissionless DeFi protocols.
Liquidity follows the path of least resistance and most compliance.
Exactly. It will naturally concentrate where the regulations are clear and where the largest capital managers feel comfortable operating. That structurally starves the non-compliant sectors of market depth and relevance over time.
And you mentioned one final filter, a systemic one that often gets overlooked, that excludes platforms from Tier 1, ESG, environmental social governance.
Yes, this is a powerful, non-financial compliance hurdle that shouldn't be underestimated. BlackRock is arguably the world's leading proponent of ESG investing principles.
Right, it's core to their brand now.
So this convergence strongly suggests that DLT platforms themselves will increasingly be vetted and selected based partly on their environmental profile, favoring, say, proof-of-stake systems that meet carbon neutrality targets over more energy-intensive ones.
Like certain proof-of-work systems.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
And also based on their ability to facilitate verifiable ESG reporting for the assets tokenized on them. It's another layer of institutional curation. Restricting acceptable platforms to only those that align perfectly with incumbent policy goals like ESG, further marginalizing systems that are energy intensive or perhaps less transparent about their governance.
So the ultimate takeaway seems crystal clear. The very technology that was born out of a desire to bypass the existing power structure.
It's being perfectly shaped by that power structure to actually consolidate financial control while achieving unprecedented operational simplification and efficiency for themselves, the established players. So if we just try to synthesize this whole deep dive, the real power of this BlackRock WEF nexus seems to be the formal synchronization, the locking together of the biggest capital deployment strategy on Earth with the global policy creation machine.
Yeah.
And the result is this structural acceleration towards an incredibly efficient, yes, but also digital, traceable, and fully permissioned financial system.
And looking ahead, say, to 2025, 2030, the strategic projections stemming from this analysis seem pretty unavoidable. First, that dominance of the regulatory moat we talked about, it looks absolute now. Meaning compliance, co-authored through this very nexus, will likely be the single biggest factor determining project success and valuation. It will channel virtually all significant institutional liquidity towards protocols that have successfully jumped through those hoops and integrated the demanding regulatory requirements. So, if a project doesn't figure out how to integrate KYC, AML, verifiable identity solutions, it risks just being structurally sidelined no matter how good the tech is otherwise.
That seems to be the trajectory.
Actually,
Precisely. And that leads directly to the second big projection, the identity mandate enacted. That imperative for secure, traceable transactions, championed by Fink, embedded in WEF roadmaps, looks set to force pervasive digital identity verification across all regulated digital assets.
which basically renders transactional anonymity within the regulated financial sphere.
Technologically non-compliant and, frankly, politically unsustainable. It's being designed out of the core system.
You can see the focus clearly. The institutional agenda is laser focused on infrastructure, utility, and regulatory certainty, not on speculative permissionless tokens. The assets getting the green light, the ones succeeding, are those that enable the compliant processing of the real physical economy onto these new rails.
Absolutely. The structural curation of the digital asset world is well underway. And it structurally favors indispensable infrastructure, things like Chainlink, like SEI, potentially WCBDCs, and regulated access points like the ETPs for Bitcoin and XRP. They're building the new financial roads, essentially. And they're making damn sure they control the toll booths and write the specifications for the vehicles allowed on those roads.
Okay. This whole analysis leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, the curious learner, trying to navigate this huge technological and political shift. We've seen the institutional mandate prioritizes essential infrastructure, utility that bridges the old world to the new compliant one.
So given everything we've broken down in this deep dive, what is the single most valuable piece of infrastructure utility that you could potentially invest in or build or deploy? Think about a service, a protocol, a tool, something that perfectly aligns with enabling KYC or processing verifiable off-chain data or guaranteeing high-speed compliant settlement.
Because that utility.
That utility, the necessary scaffolding for this newly forming multi-trillion-dollar, fully permissioned global financial system, that is what looks set to capture the dominant share of institutional capital flow in the coming years. Not necessarily the speculative token grabbing headlines today, that infrastructure layer. That's where the deep opportunity likely lies.
A really compelling framework for thinking about the future. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Great Convergence. We'll be back soon with more insights from the source material you need to know about.